দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি চ্যানেল 24 এর বিশেষ আয়োজন মুখোমুখিতে। মুখোমুখিতে আমাদের এবারের অতিথি IOM এর ডিরেক্টর জেনারেল মিস্টার উইলিয়াম লেসেসুইং। Hello sir, welcome to the show and thank you so much for allowing us within so short notice of time. As you know, we all know that you're here to see the Rohingya situation by your own eyes. So first of all, we'd like to know your observation.
First of all, it's the fastest developing refugee humanitarian crisis in the world. I think it's unprecedented, the scale, the scope, and the speed with which this has occurred. As you know, there were already about 300,000 Rohingya in the country being cared for since 2013 under the watchful eye and the attentive support of your government. And we've had now about 560,000 more come into Cox's Bazar area from the violence in Rakhine State starting the 25th of August. So I know of no time when we've had so many leave and arrive in another country at the same time. So this has overwhelmed everyone, I think, in terms of response. But there's a lot of goodwill there. I'm extremely grateful to the Prime Minister, your government, and the people of Bangladesh for their generosity, their understanding that these are some of the most persecuted and vulnerable people in the world and require our support. And we want to support that effort.
I know IOM is supporting and IOM taking is the lead role, being the UN agency, if I'm not wrong. So, sir, do you think we all know there are a lot of challenges to take care of these Rohingya people. After your visit, what are the major challenges you have seen and those need to be taken care as early as possible?
Well, in some ways you could say that everything is a priority. But among those priorities, probably number one would be shelter. Here again, your government has made a great contribution by being willing to give up 3,000 acres, maybe even more, of forest reserve in order to accommodate the Rohingya population there. And the numbers are continuing to grow, although the pace has fallen from 15,000 a day to about 2,000 to 3,000 a day with occasional surges like 2 days ago, 10,000. It means that at this rate, in a matter of weeks or months, you're going to cross the 1 million mark. And so we have to continue to look at shelter. Food activities being very well addressed by the World Food Program. Whole question of protection and dignity, UNHCR is working on that, education, nutrition for children, UNICEF, so everybody has a piece of the action there. But we're all going to be overwhelmed if we cannot mobilize more resources. And I think that's going to happen. We will hold a pledging conference in Geneva on Monday the 23rd of October. We hope with that to raise $434 million, but that will only take us through the end of February. So we've already
That's
got
for 6 months.
That's right, 6 months. So we've already got to start thinking short to medium term and longer term planning, so that the people are taken care of until they can go home.
I know that government is trying to make a big shelter. Do you think making a big shelter for all these people can be a good solution, or shelter with small group of people?
We favor the smaller solution. We had the experience in places like Haiti after the earthquake in 2010, for example. The idea of a mega camp was really not in the interest of the vulnerable people or in the interest of the government. The difference is this: in smaller camps, they're more manageable, they're more overseeable. If you have a outbreak of disease, it's much more controllable. There's less likelihood of gender-based violence. There are all kinds of reasons that argue in favor of smaller camps. Also, our organizations are not so large that we can do a mega camp. We can concentrate much more on smaller camps. Everybody gets a piece of the action and the support. So we're very much in favor of smaller camps, and I was very pleased to hear that government is looking at something like 20 or more smaller camps that are manageable, overseeable.
As you have said, that there is a pledging conference on Geneva on 23rd of this month, and I believe it's going to be success, and it's a joint initiative by UN and other EU and other countries. But it's for 6 months that you're going to raise a fund. But what about for the long term?
Yeah.
Because these people, you cannot push them back to their countries until and unless they feel secure.
That's right.
And I'm also aware of the fact all the UN agencies are not able to work in Myanmar to stop the violence.
That's right.
They are under sort of strict security. So do you have any plan, or have you discussed the long-term pressure that we all going to have together?
You're quite right. I mean, we have to have a longer-term plan. I think we don't want to get too far out ahead of your government here. I think your government's thinking in terms of that. We have to consider that when they go back, they have to go back voluntarily and to safe conditions.
Right.
And there is no humanitarian solution to a political problem. And that political problem lies in Myanmar, and that's where the action has to come. So we're hoping that some kind of a process of dialogue can be engaged that would lead to a change in the circumstances in Rakhine State. Here, I think we're very fortunate because the report that was jointly commissioned by State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi and former Secretary General Kofi Annan is now available, the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State. It has a series of very practical suggestions. They're not revolutionary, but it allows a step-by-step approach. Basically what I would call confidence-building measures, where we start small and we build up to the point that this could be resolved and people could go back, resume their lives and their livelihood. But of course, a lot of rebuilding will have to be done. The villages were burned.
Yes.
And then the question is, how do you do this? Do you do it through a massive development program? Do you do it through a livelihoods program where they can go back and rebuild their own homes? It's not quite clear on all of that, but we know more or less what the issues are.
Okay. As IOM is forecasting its own budget, any idea for your own budget, how much IOM it's going to need to sort of handle the situation in Dhaka? Or in Cox's Bazar?
We are seeking $120 million for the next 6 months.
Is that within that 400 million?
That's part of the 434.
Okay.
So that would give you some idea of the scope of what we're talking about. So beyond that, of course, we're talking much, much more. Also, I think we need to bear in mind that we now have 9 armed conflicts from West Africa into South Asia. None of them show any signs of being resolved in the short to medium term. They're all going to require funds. But clearly, of all of them, this is probably, from a humanitarian point of view, the most urgent. Because you're talking about a population now approaching 1 million, persecuted, vulnerable people who've left all their possessions behind, who've come here and basically have nothing and are extremely vulnerable. So we have to give attention to that.
Right. As after your visit, do you suspect any epidemics? Do you sense any epidemics that of any disease that may harm the whole? Do you have had any discussion with the World Health Organization and your other?
Yes,
partners?
we're working closely. This is a major question you're asking, because that's always the concern. The good news is that WHO has managed in the course of the past week to vaccinate virtually everyone against cholera.
That's good.
Now, I just came back from Yemen. Yemen has 700,000 cases of cholera right now and 2,000 deaths. So you see the importance of that. Now, what other kinds of vaccines might be required, I'm not quite sure, but that's always a concern there, because it spreads very quickly, and these people are weak. They're very weak.
Yeah, they're very weak. And also, this time we see most of the, among all these Rohingyas, at least 60%, if I'm not wrong, are children and women. It's nearly, altogether it's nearly 80%.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's quite a tough people to handle and taken care of.
Exactly.
Any strategy to take care of all these people?
There are a number of concerns there. You mentioned the outbreak of disease. Another one, quite frankly, we got to be very concerned is gender-based violence, sexual exploitation. They can be easily exploited by traffickers or smugglers or other people of ill will. And many of these women and children I've seen are very frail. I mean, we give them a non-food items that they carry in a big sack, and it all weights them down. They've made a long trip here, walking through difficult terrain, haven't had much to eat. So they have great needs, and as you're absolutely right, more than half of them are women and children, and that's always more vulnerable.
Right. Before we go for the first break, I'd like to ask you that question. Do you think the space is given by the though there is a limitation of a space, but do you think is that enough? But I'd like to know the answer after I come back from the break. দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম IOM এর মাননীয় ডিজির সাথে। আমরা কথা বলছিলাম রোহিঙ্গা পরিস্থিতিতে তার পর্যবেক্ষণ এবং সাম্প্রতিক সফরে তার যে চিন্তা মাথায় এসেছে এবং তার ভবিষ্যৎ পরিকল্পনা নিয়ে এই আলোচনা চলতে থাকবে। সাথে থাকুন, ফিরছে একটা বিরতির পর। আমন্ত্রণ আরো একবার চ্যানেল 24 এর বিশেষ আয়োজন মুখোমুখিতে। আমাদের সাথে আছেন IOM এর ডিজি জনাব উইলিয়াম। স্যার, ওয়েলকাম ইউ ওয়ান্স অ্যাগেন। As you've been to the Cox's Bazar and you have seen yourself the area, the number of people is increasing day by day, and the land till now today is given nearly 3,000 acre. So there is a question by everybody: is that enough? What do you think, sir?
Obviously, I'm not an expert in the area. We are specialists in shelter. It depends on how many more people come across. But I gather that talking to the government that there is the understanding that if that is not sufficient, they will make available further land, and that this is part of the sacrifice and the generosity of your people and your Prime Minister. And I'm sure that they're going to find the necessary land for this. It's hard to know, but it may well not be enough if the numbers continue to increase above 1 million, 1.2 million, who knows. Then there would have to be additional land. But again, it could be done with these smaller camps is a better use of the land.
Right. So do you have any forecast, or IOM have any forecast of how many more may come, because the violence is still going on the other side?
It's very hard to predict. The one thing that's very safe to say is that it will reach 1 million fairly soon. How much beyond that?
The new ones will reach 1 million?
No, the total.
Okay.
We've got now nearly 900,000.
Yes.
So at the rate they're going now, it won't take long to pass the million. A lot will depend on what can be engaged on the other side in terms of stopping the violence. Also, some people will be tempted to leave northern Rakhine State simply because they feel isolated, that so much of the population is left. Why don't I join them? It's not quite clear, but I'm hoping that we'll be successful in bringing some stability to the area so that the others will remain there, because others will be returning at some point when things stabilize.
As IOM is work for migration, and it's a refugee situation here, if I'm not wrong. So in that case, to handle the whole thing, IOM is building its capacity more and more. Would you like to share the future plan?
Absolutely.
Of yours?
We're very committed on this issue. I've told the Prime Minister, I've told the government, I've told the people, and the Rohingya people that we've seen that we're here for the long term. We've been here a long time. Bangladesh is one of our most important member states. We have a close relationship, and so we will find the resources required. For example, since the 25th of August, we have augmented our team here by more than 200. We have more than 400 people in the country now, including 59 international staff, and we will go higher if we have to. We have a surge model where we bring people in from around the world. We beg, borrow, and steal people from our other posts to come in here and make it happen. So we're there. Whether we'll get all the resources we need remains to be seen, but we certainly are committed to the long term.
But we see that all the foreign friends like IOM, UNHCR, they're all able to work at this part of this world. They're not allowed to work in Myanmar, if I'm not wrong. Yes, we are together handling the situation, but what if we can't stop the violence on the other side?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, look, we've been in Myanmar for a long time. Myanmar, like Bangladesh, is a member state. They joined about 3 years ago. We have 12 sub-offices throughout the country, some of them on the border with Thailand. We have had for a long time 48 people in Rakhine State, but one of the first steps in the Kofi Annan report is to allow the UN agencies to resume their assistance activities. I think ICRC has been permitted to. We hope to be among the next to go back to work, because we have a lot to do. We have lots of good national staff there, and we need to work. So we will be pushing that very strongly.
Okay, and you had any discussion about your future plan with the Secretary General of UN, and anything to add on? this point?
No, I think the important thing now is that we stay coordinated on all sides, a strong coordination within your government. I've met with many of your ministers and other authorities here. We're staying coordinated within the UN system, trying to work very closely together to ensure maximum efficient use of our resources.
As government is trying to handle the situation as carefully as possible, even then, being an expert and visiting all the world, all the countries of the world, do you think we are in a kind of right track of tackling these refugees? Because this is the first time in Bangladesh, also for the media, for the practitioners, for government, and for everybody, nobody has have such experience.
Right.
So, are you in the right track?
Look, I have to say, having just come back from Cox's Bazar and visiting the camps, I think up to date it's been miraculously well handled. I think that if you look at, say, the 6 neighbors of Libya and the 4 neighbors of Syria, and you look at the situation here, we need to give a lot more attention to the generosity of countries such as your own that have kept their borders open to allow people being persecuted to come across the border to seek temporary status, temporary refuge at least until they can go back. And I think that is the key point. And we're satisfied that that policy will continue until everyone is safe and able to go back voluntarily.
And do you think organizations like World Bank can be helpful in this regard?
Absolutely. In fact, essentially,
if you kindly explain how.
If you realize, I came here from meetings with the World Bank at the annual meeting last Friday in Washington.
Washington, D.C.
And I had conversations with some of the senior officials there. I think they're trying to come to grips with in what manner could they be helpful here. And I think their resources will be needed, and I think they're serious about trying to support the effort here.
But they want to mention refugee, but Bangladesh government is not mentioning refugee. They're mentioning forcibly displaced citizens of Myanmar.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
So there's this sort of definition challenge?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think one shouldn't get caught up in definitions at this point. IOM can tell you, we agree with UNHCR. It's a refugee crisis. It's a stateless persons crisis. But for reasons that the government knows best, they want to term it something else. I think we can all live with that. But we know that it is for us at least a refugee crisis. We're treating it as such and collaborating very closely with all the other agencies to be sure that we're giving maximum effort to it.
Right. Sir, I have another question. That is, as because of this massive exodus, the local people are also suffering. Don't you think we need to look at them? We need to do some financial solvency or something for them?
You are absolutely right, and that's very much part of our program. We cannot just say that we're going to assist the Rohingya and not pay, because you have many towns and villages that are taking these people in. They're giving them warm food. They're giving them a chance to start their life again, but they're doing it at a lot of expense to themselves. So we must help them too, and that's certainly part of IOM's program to help those towns that have been so gracious.
So on this point we have to take another break. I'll come back after the short break.
Sure.
দর্শক, আমরা আলোচনা করছিলাম রোহিঙ্গারা যারা মিয়ানমার থেকে বাংলাদেশে এসেছে তাদের জন্য কিন্তু স্থানীয়রাও নানানভাবে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হচ্ছে, এবং আইওএম এর পরবর্তী যে পরিকল্পনা রয়েছে সেই পরিকল্পনার একটি বড় অংশ হচ্ছে স্থানীয় যারা নানাভাবে ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হচ্ছে তাদেরকে আবার আগের স্থানে কিংবা সেই ক্ষতিটা পূরণ করার চেষ্টা করা। মুখোমুখির এই পর্যায়ে একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, সাথে থাকুন, ফিরছি একটু পর। আমন্ত্রণ আরেকবার মুখোমুখিতে আমরা কথা বলছিলাম আইওএম ডিজি জনাব উইলিয়াম লেসির সাথে। স্যার, ওয়েলকাম ইউ ওয়ান্স অ্যাগেন। And as we've been talking, do you had any discussion with the local people from the Cox's Bazar? Do they have any angerness? Because in a report by UN Resilience Coordinator Bangladesh, they suspected there maybe I'm not sure, there may be inter-conflict between the Rohingyas and the local people, or maybe some Rohingya conflict may take place as the number of people is beyond expectations.
A couple of things are important here to avoid that.
Yes.
Number one is communication.
Yes.
We have part of our program is called Communication with Communities, so that we're helping to get the facts out there so they can then make their own judgments about it. Secondly, of course, is what we just said. We have to provide resource assistance to these communities. They cannot be expected to carry the whole burden themselves. And I think that, plus trying to keep in touch, passing information, I think will be all right. But it was something, it depends also on how long this lasts and how much cost it is to local communities. But there's a way to handle it, and we're working closely with your government to make sure that we are supporting these communities.
Right. Sir, your answer leads to me another question, that is, all the UN agencies, IOM and other organizations trying to bring more relief, but it's the developed countries, they also have some big responsibility to stop this violence on the other side and also to help us in the relief section. Do you think the response from the developed countries yet now is satisfactory on the reliefs?
In a situation like this, I mean, none of our efforts are all taken together adequate. We have to continue to look for more and more resources. And I think that the sooner we can get a political process going that will stabilize the situation in Rakhine State, particularly in the northern part, the sooner we will have a solution to this, because the ultimate solution is not going to be just humanitarian assistance. That will not solve the issue. You've got to get at the root causes. You have to have some understandings on the other side, a dialogue that reassures everyone that this is their home. They need to return voluntarily under safe conditions. But we're a long way away from that now. And it won't be organizations like IOM which do that. We're not a political organization. We're humanitarian. But we are committed to continuing the humanitarian aid as long as required until we get that political solution. And I think we have to be realistic about it. At the same time, not to lose faith, not to lose hope. If we do that, then we won't get anywhere.
Right. And as 23rd October is coming, so what are the key messages you are going to give to the rest of the world? All the countries will be there, all the donors will be there.
Right. I have a couple of messages. Number one, coming back immediately and having fresh memories of the suffering I've seen, the plight of these people. I'm going to say what I said at the beginning, that we must realize that this is probably the fastest developing humanitarian crisis we've seen. It may be unprecedented. If I link back to situations like the Hungarian Revolution 61 years ago, 200,000 people left, but they left over a longer period of time. This is 560,000 new arrivals in a period of about 4 to 5 weeks. That's unprecedented, and it's overwhelmed everyone. And therefore, I say it's also miraculous at how well the government and the agencies working together in partnership have been able to handle it. So that's number one. Number two, we have to recognize the generosity of your government, your Prime Minister. And then thirdly, we have to understand that this is the time when we have to step forward and do our very best to come up with the money we need for the next 6 months, and then put in place a medium to long-term plan that we can all embrace.
We are about to end the show, but before ending, I have a question. That it's a debate between the UN organization that whether it's the IOM or UNHCR should be in the lead role. I think IOM, as it's taking the lead role, you must be proud of. But does it cover your mandate?
It's not our specific mandate, but we have a very broad mandate. UNHCR, our traditional partner for 61 years, has a very specific mandate based on the 1951 Geneva Convention and the Stateless Convention, so that they have the major mandate for the protection of these people. And we acknowledge that and support it. On the other hand, we have been asked by your government to take the lead, and we have done so since September 2013. We've said before we're prepared to share the lead or to hand over the lead, but this is a matter for the consideration of a sovereign state of Bangladesh. So we are doing what we can now to open up our lead process as much as possible. The inter-sector coordination group has been created, which is sort of like a quasi-cluster system where, for example, UNICEF will have education and nutrition for the children, WFP obviously food, UNHCR is doing protection, dignity, shelter, and other things. So we're trying to share the lead at the same time to be faithful to what the government has asked us to do. It's sensitive, it's complex, and we want to continue to make it work in full coordination with all our partners.
Right. And after your visit, what would be your suggestion to the government that what are the prime 2-3 areas at this moment government should be taken care in keeping Rohingya in mind, because it's a first time for Bangladesh?
In terms of the needs of the
Needs.
Number one is shelter.
Okay.
This is why, and I'm so pleased that they've
And
been
the season is changing. It's from rainy to winter is coming.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
So shelter is number one. Probably number two would be health. These people are not in good condition.
And there are a lot of pregnant women as well.
That's right. Many pregnant women, many very small, many babies, very small children. Obviously, the educational needs is important, but you also have the need to continue to supply non-food items for the winter season, all the things that they're going to need to have a proper household. So those are primarily the needs, I would say, shelter, health, and non-food items, because World Food Program is very committed on the food side.
Right. And my last question is, you have met all the high officials of Bangladesh. Of course, they have the goodwill, and how strong that goodwill need to be kept for long term, and how strong it should be.
Well, my sense is that your Prime Minister and your government have made a long-term commitment here, knowing that this many people coming in might not be able to go back immediately. And that's why I think that they're able to rally a lot of support for the agencies who are partners with your government. And I think given the strong commitment that your government has made, allows us to mobilize the resources that are going to be required. We're in competition with many other conflicts, as I mentioned, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. But I think this is the one that pulls at the heartstrings of people, so that you have people know you have an arc of suffering from Rakhine State into Bangladesh, and it's that arc of suffering that under which we're working right now. But the commitment is very solid.
Right. And don't you think it's gonna tough to bring the focus here from all around the world, the donors, especially the developed countries, because a lot of conflict is going around the world, but we have to put this is the most toughest?
This is why the integrity of the process, the transparency of it, the professionalism that we bring to it, show that money is needed, money is being well spent, and that there's a good result is going to be very important, because we are in competition with other conflicts which demand resources also. And I'm going away optimistic in terms of the commitments here and in terms of the way in which it's being managed up to now, but the challenges will increase.
Thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure for allowing us within so short notice of time.
Thank you, Martin. Nice to see you.
And I believe your knowledge will help us to grow and take care of these Rohingyas properly.
Thank you very much. The role of the media is going to be very important in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
দর্শক, আমরা কথা বলছিলাম IOM এর ডিজির সাথে। তার ভাষ্যমতে সামনের দিনে যে চ্যালেঞ্জ আসছে, সেই চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলায় IOM সহ অন্যান্য দাতা সংস্থা আমাদের সাথে থাকবে বিশ্বের অন্যান্য বড় দেশগুলো, কিন্তু বাংলাদেশকে এই নতুন চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলায় দক্ষ হওয়ার জন্য আরো চোখ খোলা রাখতে হবে। দেখতে থাকুন মুখোমুখি, দেখা হবে আগামী কোনো পর্বে অন্য কোনো অতিথির সাথে।